Time is running out. If you're ready to take your practice to the next level, listen up because this opportunity ends Thursday. Whether you're a solo practitioner looking to fill your caseload, starting a group practice, or scaling an established one, we have a community for you. Next Level Practice, your fast track to a thriving solo practice. Group Practice Launch, your roadmap to successfully building and growing your team. Group Practice Boss, your guide to scaling, increasing profits, and streamlining operations. But you have to act now. These communities are only open until Thursday, and spots are filling fast. Don't let this chance slip away. Visit practiceofthepractice.com/level up and secure your spot before it's too late. Once Thursday hits, the doors close and this opportunity is gone. The clock is ticking. Join us now and start leveling up your practice today. Practiceofthepractice.com/level up. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1080. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so excited that you're hanging out with us today. Every day, almost every day, depends on sponsors and things like that, 5 to 7 days a week. We are doing this show and we want to help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. And this week is Level Up Week. So we are doing 16 live webinars this week. You've probably already attended a few of those to help you if you're in solo practice, if you are starting a group, or if you already have a group practice. Also, all of our memberships are open right now. They're open this week and next week, then doors close. We only open this twice a year. And we've got hundreds of other therapists that are in private practice in these membership communities. So we have live meetings via the platform Circle every Tuesday for our group practice owners, every Wednesday for our solo practice owners, but the group practice owners can come to that too. And then on Thursdays, people starting a group practice, that's when we have our meetings for those. And it's just amazing to see these communities form, to see people having really just major successes. Usually people are as full as they want to be within 4 to 6 months. Most people, when they're in group practice launch, will make their first hire during that program. If you don't do it, you get to come back through the program totally for free. And our group practice owners, I mean, they're just rocking it out. So if that sounds good to you, being in community with people, getting good insights, all of that, make sure you level up this week or next week over at practiceofthepractice.com/level up. It's always an exciting time where we have panels and we have experts and all sorts of just things going on. So when it comes to leveling up, Amy Morin is a person that has done this, and it's so awesome to have her here during Level Up Week. Amy is a psychotherapist and the international best-selling author of the 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do series. Her books have been translated into more than 45 languages and sold over 1 million copies. Her TEDx Talk, The Secret of Becoming Mentally Strong, has been viewed 24 million times, and she's the host of the Mentally Stronger podcast, and she lives on a sailboat in the Florida Keys. Amy, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Joe, thank you so much for having me.
So as a fellow sailor, I've got to say I am so jealous that you get to live on a sailboat. For 5 summers, I spent 5 days a week helping at-risk kids on an old Concordia cutter, 50-foot long wooden sailboat that looked like a pirate ship. And I got to do therapy on the sailboat with all these at-risk kids, and we got these grants and started this program. And, I realized after a while that, being on a boat 5 days a week meant that I really couldn't do anything with my private practice unless I was just wanted to be exhausted all the time. So kudos to you for living on a sailboat. That's incredible.
Thank you. I think I had come across your story like early on, and I think I knew that about you. I just didn't put 2 and 2 together that you're that same person that I had found on social media who was saying that years ago about doing some therapeutic things on a sailboat. And my husband had always wanted to live on a sailboat. It was never really my dream, but before I was working as a 9 to 5 therapist in rural Maine, and it really wasn't an option to live on a sailboat. But now that I get to write books and do other cool stuff, we said, well, we might as well give it a shot now. And it's been 8 years now that I've been on a sailboat.
Oh my gosh. And do you guys mostly stay in the Keys, or do you go to other islands around there, or
we do.
what's
We're
that
in
look
the
like?
I'm kind of a fair weather sailor. We are mostly in the Keys. We own what's called a dockominium. So I have a tiki hut on land and dock space so that if I want to be tethered to the dock and in a calm canal with high speed internet and all of the good stuff, I can do that. But the ocean's just around the corner. So we can go
Mm.
sailing, jet skiing, and go out and play in the water whenever we want to.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That sounds amazing. Well, this week is Level Up Week, and it's really exciting to have so many people on this week that have leveled up in different ways. Now, you're a psychotherapist turned international best-selling author, amazing TEDx speaker. I want to hear about, say, like the year or two before things really started to take off. Like, what did life look like for you when you were doing therapy before you started maybe getting into more of the audience building type of things?
Sure. I was a therapist in rural Maine. At the end of my work up there, I was working for a federal qualified health center. So it was a doctor's office, very small town. Pretty much the only other therapist in the area happens to be my sister, who had an adjoining office with me. And I was seeing patients full time for a while. And then right before I took the leap to move to the sailboat, I had cut down to part time and I was writing a couple days a week. My first husband had passed away and I needed extra income. And one of the best ways to create income seemed to be as a freelance writer. So some of the content I was creating was about mental health stuff, some of the content was just more generic stuff that I was writing for various websites. But it allowed me to write in the evenings and on the weekends outside of when I was doing therapy. And it was a great way to earn extra money when I felt like I was able to do it. It was something that I did for about 10 years, I guess, before writing the book. And obviously, as a therapist, you can only work so many hours. It wasn't an option to work nights and weekends for practical purposes, but also mental health purposes. And I didn't want to go get another steady job on the weekends because as I was grieving, I didn't always feel like I was able to do that. But freelance writing seemed like a good fit. So I balanced my time between seeing patients in the therapy office and freelance writing on the side.
Oh, wow. So when did that transition start to hit? Like, I guess, were you thinking, man, I really want to do a TED Talk. I want to write books. I want to do speaking. Or was it like, did you dip your toes in a little bit?
So most of the writing I was doing was just for the income. Initially, I made $25 an article, and if I could churn out a couple of extra articles a day and on the weekends, that's what paid my mortgage. But I went through a series of losses in my 20s. I lost my mom when I was 23. I lost my husband when I was 26. And just as I was about to turn 30, I lost my father in law. And it was on a really dark day in my life that I wrote an article called 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. And the day that I wrote it, it was just going to be a letter to myself because I was in a dark place and I needed that letter. But I found that letter was helpful. So I put it on the internet expecting a handful of people to read it, but 50 million people read it. And that's what launched my career. I actually didn't plan to write a book. I didn't set out to do a TED Talk or anything like that. It was just that one article that went viral, led to a literary agent who called and said, "Hey, you should write a book." And within a month, we had a book deal. And then things happened pretty quickly after that. But I had already spent the 10 years practicing my writing and had all of this experience both as a therapist, but also as somebody who was struggling with mental health. So I felt like that combination of things made it so if they thought I could write a book, I was going to do my best to try.
Mm. So that process of writing a book, since you were already writing articles, I've heard a lot of authors say, "Oh, it was so hard. It was just difficult." For me, when I wrote Thursday's the New Friday, I loved it. I felt like I had sketched it out. I had kept track of kind of research and stories, and it was just like putting puzzle pieces together. What was that process like for you when you wrote your first book?
So I was under a time crunch. By the time we inked the deal, it was March, and my publisher wanted the book done in June. And I was still working as a therapist. And I still had another part time writing job that I didn't dare let go of because I wasn't sure that this book was going to turn into anything. So I was researching the one chapter one day, writing it the next day, and I would send it off to my editor the next day. And that was it. I had about 3 days a week to set aside to work on the book. I did it fast, but I felt like all of those years of writing had prepared me for it. And because I had so many case studies from the therapy office and so many things, like it was like the book was already inside me. So sitting down to write it felt doable. I think a lot of people now will say, well, it takes 5 years to write a book. And I could easily take up 5 years to write a book. But because I had that deadline, I was able to churn it out in a short deadline. I thought, it's not every day somebody invites you to write a book. So if they give you a tight deadline, meet it. So I was
Yeah,
able to
that's
do it.
Parkinson's law. Work expands to the time given.
And that's so true, because otherwise I could have, edited and rehashed and read over every chapter a million more times and probably still would have never felt like it was as good as I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my timeline was a little bit longer, but we signed on April 15th. I still remember because it was tax day. And it was, they wanted it by the end of September, by October 1st. But I knew we were going to be leaving on the road. This was 2020, to live out of a camper. Like early September. So I was like, okay, September 1st is my deadline. And I want to be about 20,000 words above what they want so that they can just brutally edit. They're good at editing. They're good at, condensing it. And so I just had the word count, and I knew that really all I had was one day a week that I could fully dedicate to that. I needed to keep the practice going, the podcast going, the consulting going. And so similar to you, it was, I knew every Thursday I had to write a full chapter. And so at the end of, and I'd love to hear some of your process, because I think that people are interested in kind of the backside, that sounds naughty, the back end of kind of creating these sorts of things. So my process was, I would, at the end of the Thursday, I would have my whiteboard, and I would take everything that I had gathered in Trello for the next chapter and put it up on the whiteboard, and then also think about just like, what questions do I have? So for example, I have a chapter on curiosity, and I was like, okay, what comes to mind around that? And like, curiosity killed the cat. Like, where did that come from? And so just like anything related to that chapter, and I would put it up there, and then I would just let it marinate for a week. And then when I came in on Thursday morning, it was just like, oh, I had all these ideas, or throughout the week, I might, write something on the whiteboard if I thought of it, or it was great to kind of let my mind in the background think about that next chapter. What was your process like as you were writing that book in such a short period of time?
Yeah, mine was similar as well. So I outlined the 13 chapters. It was things like the first chapter is mentally strong people don't waste time feeling sorry for themselves. There's
Mm-hmm.
another chapter about not shying away from change. So I knew every chapter was going to have a little quiz in the beginning. It was going to have some signs that you're struggling with this thing, some strategies about what to do instead. There'd be some case studies and anecdotes from my therapy office, but I also wanted some stories of other people, like a historical figure or somebody in pop culture. So as I outlined these chapters ahead of time, I knew to kind of be on the lookout for these things. So if I ran across an example of somebody who was shying away from change, even if that wasn't the chapter I was on yet, I could go home from work that day and jot that down. Or if I were sitting around and I thought, oh, well, another way that self-pity sometimes manifests is this, then I could always go back and plug it into that chapter. So I guess in a similar way to you, I always had it in the back of my mind, and it was just a matter of thinking about it throughout the week, because if I had just sat down and the only time I thought about it was as I was writing, I probably would have missed a lot of the big picture stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just that whole, like, being paralyzed by perfection, when you're trained as a therapist, whether you had a dissertation or a thesis or even just papers, it's like you didn't usually turn in crap. And you tried to do your research and do all that. And when you're writing a book, not that we're writing crap, but it's like when you're on a tight deadline, there's less of a kind of overthinking, and similar to that Buddhist idea of kind of first thought, best thought. It seems like, at least for me, things flowed more like they would in a conversation that then we could structure a lot easier than sitting with just like a blank, screen in front of me.
I think so too. And there's always that fear of not wanting to say the wrong thing. And the thought of, obviously, in our practice with our therapy clients, like, you don't want to say something and then think, oops, I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I was too forward with that. But we do all make mistakes. But there's something about putting it in writing that can feel a little scary of, ooh, if I put this down in writing, if I put this article out there, I put this on my blog, or I write a book, somebody might misconstrue it, or so the words might get twisted, or maybe it's going to come out in a slightly different way than I think it's going to. And you could certainly overthink it. In my case, I think, again, the timeline crunch worked to my advantage because I didn't have a lot of time to overthink.
So when did the TED Talk opportunity come up?
So let's see. So the article that went viral came out at the end of 2013. The book came out in the end of 2014, and the TED Talk was at the end of 2015. So it was a year after I wrote the book.
Wow. And that just took off right away, or did that take a little time to take off?
That took time as well. So I remember when it went online, and I remember thinking, actually, the day I gave the TED Talk, I was really nervous. It was an amazing place that we gave it. It was a theater, a really cool theater that we all got to give our talks in, but it was really dark. And it was the only time I had ever given a talk to an audience that I couldn't see. So I couldn't see their reactions while I was talking. So I had no idea if they were sound asleep, if they were listening, if they were laughing, crying. I didn't know. So I was incredibly nervous on stage, and my voice cracks the whole time. So I remember after I stepped off the stage thinking, oh, I kind of hope nobody ever sees that, because I'm giving a talk about mental strength and I don't sound like I have a ton of mental strength. And initially, it really didn't take off. It was pretty slow burn for several weeks. I remember I even sent it to a couple of my friends to be all, hey, can you click on this? Because it didn't have that many views. And I just remember thinking, all right, so maybe 500 people will see this. I guess that's okay. But over time, it's gotten about 10,000 views. I think it still gets about 10,000 views a week to this day. And it's just been word of mouth, people sharing it, clicking on it, and sending it to their friends, or putting it on their own website to share. And so it's been a slow burn, but it certainly has grown over time up to, I think, about 24 million views right now.
Man. It's never too early to start thinking about tax season. That's why I've partnered with my friends over at Herd. Herd serves as the financial back office built specifically for therapists in private practice. They're an all-in-one financial solution that combines software with human support to handle bookkeeping, taxes, payroll, and more. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned clinician or in your first year of your practice, Herd will identify growth areas and streamline best financial practices for your business. When you sign up with Herd, you'll connect your bank accounts so your transactions will be automatically pulled in and categorized. My favorite thing about Herd is their allocation guide, which helps you decide how much to pay yourself each month and how much to set aside for taxes. You'll also receive financial insights such as profit and loss statements and monthly reports. You can say goodbye to poring over spreadsheets and guessing your tax deductions or quarterly payments. Focus on your clients, and Herd will take care of the rest. Sign up for a free consultation today at joinherd.com/Joe and get 1 month free with promo code Joe. Again, that's joinherd.com/Joe. Now, for me, the book Talk Like TED is just such a good book in regards to kind of learning public speaking and kind of learning how to do a good TED Talk. How did you prep for your TED Talk?
So after my book hit the shelves, I started to get speaking invitations. I guess it was even after the article went viral. And I had never been on a stage in a huge conference room or anything like that. And the very first talk I was invited to give, it was on a stage with people like Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to have to fake this because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I got through that first one, and I don't think I did horrible, but I knew that I needed some help. I didn't know how do you make slides that even show up on a screen that big, and how do you speak to a room full of people when there's people in this stadium-like setting. And so one of the other speakers at that very first event I spoke at was named Sally Hogshead. She's an amazing
Oh my gosh,
speaker.
I love Sally.
Yeah, she's amazing as a speaker.
Her How to Fascinate quiz I did with my whole team. It changed the way that we at Mental Wellness Counseling operated.
See, and I had an incredible experience watching Sally. I thought, oh, that's somebody that knows how to get up there and give a talk. And so I did some research about her online, found out she had a speaking coach by the name of Nick Morgan. And I thought, all right, if she has a speaking coach, then that's probably what I need too. So I called up Nick Morgan, hired him to teach me how do you give a speech and make it
Mm.
entertaining, yet how do you impactful? How do you give a speech to an audience of 10,000 people? I'm a social worker that I think I once spoke in like a church basement to 5 people who were struggling with domestic violence. I've never done this before, and invested a lot of money, but hoping that it would pay off in the end. A lot of time working with him to figure out how do you craft a speech. And so worked with him on that too. Like, all right, now how do you give a speech that's only going to be 15 minutes long? How do you get up there and say something that's meaningful and impactful, yet short and concise? And so he certainly read through my earliest drafts and helped me come up with a talk that I felt good about giving.
Mm. Yeah, I feel that way, when it comes to public speaking. One of those like, oh my gosh moments was when Simon Sinek invited me to join his team and to do speaking through Team Simon and to do that sort of thing. And it's just like, okay, I got to raise my game here. I have to definitely level up my skills that, I had given talks, I'd done the podcast, but nothing at that level. And so to just that idea of, okay, who are the experts that are out there? And that's the value of consulting with experts that have done what you want to do. As you've transitioned out of therapy, what's been difficult about that, and what's been exciting or fun?
So I guess stepping out of the 9 to 5 office was exciting because and I had the freedom to move on to a sailboat and to do things differently and to not feel like I was gonna have to be just worrying about the billable hour anymore. That's probably been the most exciting part. The most difficult part has been just then not knowing, like, am I going to earn royalties from my books? Am I going to make money from this course? Am I going to get enough speeches this year? Like, not having a regular income is definitely scary as well and uncomfortable. And not knowing about all of the opportunities. As a social worker, I was trained on the billable hour and making sure that we are helping people one on one. I didn't know how to do things on a bigger scale or a different level. Also wanted to figure out what's that balance. I want to make sure that I'm helping people, but I want to make sure that I'm charging fairly for my time as well. And finding that balance is something that I continue to wrestle with at times. Is like, how much do I give away for free? What do I charge for? How do I make sure that I still fulfilling my mission of getting these ideas and principles into the world, but also how do I make sure that that I am charging and building a sustainable business and one that I can continue to expand.
Yeah. So then, how do you think through kind of this new business, knowing that it's not the same as kind of a billable hour model? I know a lot of therapists, are excited about the opportunities that, especially, I think with just such attention on mental health post 2020. Maybe speak to some of the opportunities that people like don't know are out there, but then also how you personally are thinking through your business and leveling up within the business.
Yeah, there are so many opportunities. People are more interested than ever in getting valuable quality mental health content, whether they consume it via an online course or somebody starts a mastermind. They do online therapy, online groups. Speaking to businesses, businesses are always looking for consultants on wellness and mental health. Um, Brands are looking for ambassadors in mental health. As you know, podcasts can be a lucrative way to get sponsorships. People are always looking to sponsor newsletters. So it's about, I think, putting yourself out there. And then for me, the opportunities have been pretty incredible that have just come my way. Things I wasn't necessarily looking for. I partnered with Lego last year to become their spokesperson because they had discovered that the way that we praise little girls impacts them. When we say to little girls, "Hey, you're pretty, you're perfect," and we say to boys, "You're brave and you're creative," that obviously takes a toll on them. And so it was one of those things that I would have never thought to reach out to Lego and say, "Hey, let's work together." But Lego reached out to me because I'm putting enough content out there. And so I love that. I love that opportunity that
Mm.
just by putting myself out there, so many things tend to come to me with things that I wouldn't have ever thought of. But then the trick is also to make sure that I say no to the things that aren't in line with the brand or my mission. And even though
Hmm.
sometimes they're quite lucrative and they're amazing. So I'm always
I
looking
gotta
for,
pause you and just say it's
yeah,
so awesome when two guests are back to back, and I didn't plan it at all for it to just dovetail so perfectly. those of you that are listening, if you didn't listen yesterday, we had Dr. Charlotte Markey, who is one of the top researchers on girls and body image. And that episode is right in line with what Amy was just talking about. So make sure you listen to yesterday's episode 1079. It's like part A, part B, as to kind of what we're talking about here. So sorry to interrupt there, but wanted to make sure that we mentioned yesterday's episode because I literally just interviewed her right before you today, and we didn't even plan that.
Well, you know what's even more amazing? She's actually being interviewed on my podcast tomorrow.
Shut up. Say hi to her. She was delightful. She was so fun. Oh my gosh. So I guess we just got to round this all out, and I'll be on your podcast, and we'll make it, when she launches a podcast, we can both be on hers.
Absolutely. Isn't that funny when those things happen? But like I say, opportunities sometimes that you weren't expecting come your way. You meet people who are doing interesting things, and you just never know when something just like this happens where you say, hey, do you know so-and-so? You introduced me to somebody, or we realize we know the same person and we have that connection. And then incredible things can happen because if you just took that example of what you do compared to what I do, compared to what Charlotte does, we all do something a little bit differently and have our hands in different strategies, and we're all creating content in different ways. Yet here it is. We can all come together probably in some pretty creative ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's what I like about this phase of kind of my business and my career is that it's often not as linear as when I was doing clinical work. And for me, I like that kind of creative agility that happens while still having kind of the core things I do, but also having unexpected things that just seemed way different than when I was in the clinical world. You mentioned something a minute ago when you said, and saying no to things that kind of aren't on brand or something along those lines. I want to hear more about how saying no helps you say yes to the things that matter. And then I have a follow-up question, but I'll save that till after you're done. So when you say no to something and that allows you to do something like more on brand, tell me about that process. Have you always been that way, or did you have to kind of learn that the hard way?
It's something I've learned the hard way. There's been opportunities I've said yes to and then wished I hadn't. And it's either because it turned out to be not on brand, or it just really isn't in line with what I wanted to do, or it was something that took up way more time and energy than I expected. And one of the problems has been that I might get an opportunity these days that is literally half the salary of what I used to make in an entire year. And it might be a one-day project with somebody. So my tendency, of course, is to say, yes, please, absolutely. But whenever I do that, I have to then remember, like, but also, what is it still costing me? Is it going to cost me part of my reputation? Is it going to cost me credibility with future sponsors or advertisers? Might it harm my mission if it's not in line with that? So fortunately, over the years, I've gotten better at taking that step back and saying, okay, yes, this is a really exciting opportunity. It's lucrative and it would be amazing. Yet here are the potential downsides. And just because it sounds exciting or it sounds like a really cool thing to do doesn't mean I should do it. And I think it takes a while for my brain to kind of catch up to where I am in life now, to know that, yeah, you can say no to more things. And yes, a decade ago, you would have jumped at an opportunity like this, but now you're in a different place and you don't necessarily have to do those things. And it's wise to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So my follow-up question is, when you're kind of known for a very particular thing, so for you becoming mentally strong, or, kind of doing the opposite of, what the things that mentally strong people don't do, when you're known for something that clearly, I think a lot of creative people can get bored with that topic. They can get like, I just want to shift gears into something else. Like, how have you kept this topic interesting for yourself? Because, I mean, you've been doing this, for a long time. Like, what have you done to make sure that you are continuing to engage your own mind in a way that you want to, and not just staying on brand for the sake of making money, but to stay on brand because you genuinely find that interesting?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things I found helpful as the years have gone on is to figure out, like, what else can I pair mental strength with? So, take mental strength and money. I could easily do courses, podcasts, do lots of things about how can people stay mentally strong when they're getting out of debt or when they're trying to save money. Or I can pair mental strength with sports, for example. How do you stay mentally strong when you're trying to run a marathon or you're training for a triathlon? or I can pair it with parenting and how do you raise mentally strong kids. So I found that that's been the most helpful thing, is to just figure out what can I pair it with, and then what kind of content can I create around that, so that I can continue to grow my brand, but still stay on brand, but also branch out into something that's a little bit different, so I can keep researching more things and keep it exciting, and keep creating fresh new ideas that aren't going to bore my followers to death either.
Yeah, that's awesome. For the podcast, when did you launch that, and what have you found helpful with that? But also, what do you wish you would have done differently?
Oh, that's a great question too. So I originally launched a podcast right at the beginning of COVID, and but a couple of months after launching it, I joined forces with a bigger company had said that they wanted to sort of take over our podcast. So we joined forces, did that for a couple of years, went back out on my own about a year ago, and have thoroughly enjoyed that. I love meeting new people, having guests on my show. Also love to be able to do solo content. The biggest lesson I learned was probably that partnering with somebody meant a lot more than I thought, in terms of like the legalities of who owns what. And I learned I don't want to give away any of my intellectual property. I want to make sure that I own my stuff. That's a lesson I've certainly learned over and over again as I create content for other websites or I write articles for places, is just how important it is to look back at who actually owns it. Just because you wrote this article for this website, who owns it? So I learned so much about that. And even with podcasting, if I record a celebrity on my podcast, who owns that recording? That's why it's so important to make sure that you know what you're doing and have a good idea of that. Otherwise, some of those questions can come into play. We had an incident with a celebrity who said something and wanted to take it back, and that came into play of, well, who owns that recording?
Yeah, so awesome. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that there are so many opportunities to take the knowledge that you have in private practice and turn it into other forms of content, like this things that you say to your clients, the things that you do in therapy, the growth that you've seen from people. There are countless opportunities to take that knowledge and do other things with it, so that you can build multiple streams of revenue if that's what you wish to do.
So awesome. Well, if people want to get your books, if they want to learn more about your work, where should we send them?
My website's the best place, which is amymorinlcsw.com. I had the website long before I started writing books. And one of the things I do happen to do is I do mental strength coaching, but I found that a lot of people who actually hire me for coaching are people who want to know, how do you write a book? How do you create multiple streams of revenue? So I do offer that as well, if any of your listeners are interested in talking further.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
You know, sometimes I really like just digging into the level up journey instead of just the content that people are creating. You can go to lots of places and read about what Amy says in regards to the secret of becoming mentally strong. You can watch the TED Talk, you can read the books. But for me, to just hear how other people think through leveling up, like hiring a coach, hiring, speaking coach, what are the things that just helped, Amy get better at the craft of becoming an influencer? So often we see online all these, influencers that do whatever. But we're talking to therapists. We're talking to people that are highly educated, that want to impact the world on a different level. And so if that's you, and you're interested in that, we actually have Audience Building Academy, which is kind of from the philosophy that you shouldn't go build an e-course or go build all this content first and try to sell it. You need to build an audience first. And so Audience Building Academy, it's available on our Teachable site. You can find it through going on our website. That's something that if you're looking at kind of leveling up, that might be something that would be helpful for you. We also have Podcast Launch School, which is going to walk you through how to start a podcast and do all of that. If you go to podcastlaunchschool.com, we have tons of plans to help support you in your podcast, whether you're just getting started or already have one. So we have lots of resources. Don't forget, this is Level Up Week. All this week and next, we have opened up our communities, whether you're in solo practice, whether you're in solo practice, starting a group practice, or you're in group practice, we have a community for you. Sign up for those communities over at practicewithpractice.com/level up. Would love to see you in there and connect with you. Also, we could not do the show without our amazing sponsors, and the end of the year is right around the corner. It's not too early to be thinking about tax season, and that's why we've partnered with our friends over at Herd. Herd serves as the financial back office and is built specifically for therapists in private practice. They're amazing. They're an all-in-one financial solution that combines software with human support to handle your bookkeeping, your taxes, your payroll, and more. You can sign up for a free consultation call today over at joinherd.com/Joe. That's joinherd.com/Joe, and get a month for free with promo code Joe at checkout. Thank you so much for listening and letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.